I can't really come up with anything witty to say at the beginning of this review, so let's get into it. Censor is brought to us by director Prano Bailey Bond and stars Nima Algar as Enid. Enid is a part of the UK Censor Board in the 1980s, a group that would censor films for release in the UK, which I guess doesn't really need a lot of explanation, it was kind of in the name. And in the 80s, there were a shit ton of underground hardcore horror movies, especially on VHS, and this is primarily what they spend their time censoring. So Enid spends a tremendous amount of her day watching old school 80s vintage horror flicks and deciding what is and is not appropriate for the people of Europe. She's doing God's work when Enid watches a new movie that has a suspicious amount of similarities to an event that happened to her as a child. She starts to investigate the making of the film and the filmmakers and goes down a rabbit hole that could lead her to answers to this long mystery from her childhood. I'd heard about Censor a while back and I was really interested in seeing it. It looked like it was right up my alley. It looked to be this kind of really weird mystery horror psychological thriller, and I'm really into those. And it is, but what it also is really fucking obtuse and out there at times, especially closer to the end of the film. This is essentially about a woman who lost her sister as a child but can't remember exactly what happened and thinks that she may have found a lead to that mystery. And she goes in whole hog to try and figure this thing out and kind of starts to lose herself a bit in it. And by kind of starts to lose herself, I mean this chick really starts to lose it. Or is it everyone else? We don't really know. That's the mystery of the film. Is Enid starting to lose her mind, or is she just really onto something that is so out there and so unbelievable that everyone else just can't fathom it? I really like this aspect of the film. This movie did a really good job of keeping you interested and invested on what's going on. Now, that being said, this movie is a slow as hell burn. It's not even a burn, it's more of a smolder. The vast majority of this movie is really slow. The mileage that you get out of it is totally going to depend on how invested you are in this story. And that ain't gonna be everybody. Some people are not gonna be interested in this story. In fact, I predict that a lot of people are gonna say that this movie is pretty boring. And I get that. This is an odd one, but if you stick with it, it is a really interesting film. However, that ending, yeah, we're gonna get to that in a minute. Now, the movie has some really good performances from the likes of Nima Algar and Michael Smiley, and these go a long way in keeping you invested in what's going on. And while everybody included here does a fantastic job, Nima Algar is wonderful as Enid. Regardless of what you end up thinking about the film or its obtuse way of getting its story out to you, Algar is absolutely wonderful here and carries the entire movie on her back. The movie's also got a great look. It looks and feels like the 80s. I was never confused about when we were. It seems like there's a tremendous amount of detail in this world to make it as believable as possible, and they did a great job there. Now, seeing this story about this woman who's kind of spiraling down this rabbit hole uncontrollably was really interesting and a good time. I was really on board with what was going on and interested to see where it was going to go. However, when we get to the end of the film, this is where it's going to lose a lot of people, because the end of this movie is really obtuse and really out there. I'm not going to ruin it, but there is a tremendous amount of ambiguity here. If you're looking for clear-cut answers in the end of this movie, you are not going to get that. Like, not by a long shot. In fact, the end of this movie is probably going to leave you with more questions than you had before entering into it. Now, I do get what happened in the end of this movie, or at least I think I do, but this is one of those movies that's going to be very open to interpretation. What one person takes from it could be completely different from this person over here. But I think I get the basic idea of what the filmmakers were trying to get across. Now, that being said, I gotta say that I thought the end of this film was a little bit too obtuse. It was a bit too out there. I enjoy ambiguous movies with ambiguous endings. Last year's Vivarium had one of the most ambiguous endings I've ever seen, but it was wonderful. It was so good. I really liked that movie. And that's because they gave you just enough to not necessarily tell you exactly what may or may not be going on, but they gave you enough to theorize about it, to think about it, to come up with a bunch of different directions it could have gone. That movie is wide open for discussion. People want to talk about the ending of that movie, as I predicted with my review. But this movie's ending doesn't really give you as much to go on there. It gives you something, and as I said, I think I know where it went. I have my own conclusion as to what happened. But it just seemed like it was missing a little something. I didn't necessarily need any concrete ending or anything like that. But there was something about the ambiguity ambiguity here that was missing, which, I mean, that kind of goes against the whole idea of ambiguity. Still, there was like just a little something extra I could have used to push things a little further. Now, I don't know exactly what that is, but I do know in the end, I was left feeling like I wanted a little bit more, but not in the good way. I didn't hate it, but it wasn't exactly what I was looking for, and it is going to turn off a whole lot of people. Also, on the horror aspect of things, this movie isn't really a horror movie. It is very much a psychological thriller, but I've heard some people use the word horror to describe it. It's not that. It is not horror whatsoever. Just know that going in, because if you go in expecting a horror, that's just not what you're getting. Guys, Censor was a very interesting movie. The first 2/3 of it I really did enjoy, and the final third I didn't hate, but it was just kind of a bit too far out there. Regardless if I did get it and I understand what they were going for, I just felt a little lacking. Now that being said, everything that led up to it, while a very slow burn, was done extremely well. This movie had great performances, it looked fantastic, and had a wonderful tone. And while this is a really hard recommend for most people, if this is your type of movie, it is absolutely worth streaming.
Across the street.
This is a slow one, like really slow, but if it sounds like it's your kind of thing, then check it out one night and I think you'll have a pretty good time with it. So there it is, guys, my review of Censor. If you enjoyed and want more content like this, hit that subscribe button and help my little channel grow. If you want to help out the channel, check out my Patreon in the description below and become a jarhead and get some of the awesome benefits that go along with that, like these guys. If you liked what I had to say, give me a like. If not, let me know in the comments below why. And as always, stay sexy, Yorkshire.
That I create horror. Horror is already out there in all of us.
While I'm not gonna spoil this movie or its ending, what I will say, something that I did notice that I think might get away from some people, is the aspect ratio of the film. It changes here or there throughout the film, especially closer to the end. If you're having a hard time coming up with what exactly is going on in the ending of the film, pay attention to that aspect ratio and how it changes, and that might lead you down a road to at least where I ended up with what I think happened at the end of this story. Pretty sure that whole thing plays into what's going on. Or, I mean, I might be totally fucking wrong, because this movie is really fucking weird and really fucking out there.